Now,
Okay.
hopefully we're good. I see you. And we are now
I
officially
see you. You look good.
starting over again. All right. Now, where were we?
We were talking about my lack of refreshments.
For the record, because at some point in time when you get this, you are going to be posting this to your own YouTube channel. Mama Vi here has managed to corner the ever elusive and lovely Gloria Brame for lunch with me, even if it is over Zoom. And since two coffeeholics are having this conversation together, there must be coffee. Now, I get to ask you all sorts of interesting questions.
Anything and everything you want.
But I promised we were going to just start with one and see where this madness goes. Now,
Okay.
with
I have some, and this is the problem with eating while talking, but I have so many stories, Vi. It could just go in so many different directions.
since hopefully I will be doing this with you at least once a week until God comes again, hold on to all those stories, or should I say next year in Israel, whichever way that works out.
Next year, right here in Georgia.
I'm going to, for now, put aside all the books you've read, the classics, the one that half of this scene is based on, and I'm coming back to the beginning. Old friend, how the heck did you get into this? Once upon a time,
I was a very sexually curious and super horny young teenager. And from the time I started masturbating, which was early, I always had really weird fantasies, you know, of captivity and kidnaps and people torturing me, but not in unpleasant ways, you know, torturing me in ways where ultimately I had an orgasm or I had to sacrifice myself for the group to preserve their, you know, their safety. I had to willingly be a concubine or, you know, all kinds of fantasies like that. And I remember them, you know, or like the scenario of being, you know, dropped like Jane into the middle of a jungle, you know, and be carried away in bondage. Or so by the time I was 17 and 18 and already having sex with grown-up men, there was one man apparently who recognized that potential because he asked me to call him master in bed, and I thought it was the hottest thing ever. But we didn't really do anything kinky except that he was a lot older than me, so that was kind of kinky in itself. You know, there was that older younger dynamic. And mainly boyfriends turned me down until to do, you know, they're like, I am not going to do the kinky stuff, you know. And I'd been with women too, and they weren't interested in the kinky stuff either. So I always thought that kinky stuff was what you fantasized about, but nobody actually did. And if you did do it, you must have been really fucked up.
okay.
But then when I was about 21, I met, and for the sake of a green card, his, obviously, married a Pakistani guy, and he loved kink. He had no inhibitions about it. Whatever I asked him to do, he was willing to do. Sometimes I was the dom, and I said, you just lie there and I'm going to do things to you.
Okay.
And sometimes I was, you know, the helpless child bride forced into marriage to a cruel man,
Kinky, kinky.
borrowing from his culture liberally, you know. And the thing is that he thought it was like the greatest thing ever. And I thought it was like really shameful that we were doing these things. But I had
Time.
yeah.
All right, you've had these fantasies for over a decade. You finally find someone who is willing to have every fantasy you could conceivably have fulfilled, and now you're ashamed of it? I'm a little unclear on this.
Once he asked me to dominate him and whip him with a belt. And I put on what I imagined to be a dominant outfit scraped together from I was, you know, an impoverished college student living in Jackson Heights. You know? And, but I had stockings and I had really uncomfortable high heels and I had a garter belt. So I put that shit on and he gave me his belt. And while I was whipping him, all of a sudden I was like, what kind of a feminist am I? This is horrible. I am emulating men. I am emulating the masculine, you know, I'm domestically abusing him. And I said, I can't. And I ran into the bathroom and closed the door and trembling sat down on the toilet and my panties were soaked.
Okay.
And I'm like, fuck.
All righty.
And that really was where I that was a purgatory I lounged in for the next 5 or 6 years. I didn't meet anybody else who wanted to do anything kinky. I had some kinky random sex. You know, I'd meet a man but then I would be like, oh, he's too kinky. So listen, you know, I was raised in a very anti-sex house.
Oh.
You know, everything I learned about sex, I learned from my friends on the streets and through experience because I started hooking up with guys when I was 13 and 14.
Okay.
And by the time I was 15, knew all about birth control because I didn't want to get pregnant and have to have an abortion.
Smart.
So I just never wanted to make that choice and I'm glad I never had to. So I was not this version of myself.
Obviously, but
I had a lot of emotional issues. I had a lot of psychological issues. I did not have good mental health. I made a lot of really bad choices. I let my natural introversion run my life. So I didn't have a lot of friends. And I didn't have really great friends.
got it.
You know, so, but I was on a mission to get educated. So actually, that's where I put my focus. And I just kept going to school as long as was humanly possible, long after I ran out of money to go to school and had taken all the loans I could take. And then I just was working on Wall Street and I got a job and moved up, you know, from like secretary to whatever, financial analyst. It took a number of years. But during that time, men kept coming over to me and asking me if I was into S&M. Like somebody said, I'm going to give you this book and I know you're going to like it. Maybe you'll take me on an adventure. And he gave me 9.5 weeks.
Okay.
Or another guy came up to me and said, I had a dream about you last night in fishnet stockings and high heels, and you were whipping me. And my girlfriends were like in other cubicles. And after he walked away, we all like clustered and screamed. And I'm like, why me? Why me? Why is it always me that people are always, you know, and it happened like 4 or 5 times.
All right, so squirrel. Let's go
But
back.
they all saw me as a dom, and I didn't.
Let's answer that question. Why you? What were you exuding, good doctor, that makes random men in the office go, hurt me, please?
I just feel like I was always, you know, I always had to take care of myself and look out for myself. Nobody ever had my back, not my family or anybody. And more often than not, even my parents, who were very damaged people, needed more help from me than they were able to give me ever.
Got it.
So I had a decisive personality. You know, I made my own decisions. I had a keen sense of justice and versus injustice. And I always stood up. Always, my whole life. And that's because my parents were Holocaust survivors. And that really just left this weight on me.
Understood.
You know, about you have to fight injustice as soon as you see it. And you have to speak against it when you see it. Because, yeah.
I understand that part of your personality. I'm trying to make the link between A and Q here.
Okay. So then I was working on Wall Street and all of this shit had happened. And I decided I really didn't want to be on Wall Street. I really wanted to live a life of a poet, which is what I was educated for. So I took a poetry workshop. I was really depressed at the time. I was married to a non-kinky man by then. The Pakistani guy and I had broken up years ago. I was married to a really conventional guy. I felt really like I was smothering. So I took a poetry class. And like 2 weeks into the poetry class, this woman really started to befriend me hard. Like she pursued me, and I'd never had a woman pursue me like that. So I was intrigued.
Okay.
And I'm pretty polymorphously perverse, you know, I'll try it. And she was heavy into the scene, which I didn't know at first. But the more I got to know her, the more she told me about it and the places she'd been to and experience she'd had. And she was just my entertaining friend who shocked me. But I loved the stories and I always wanted to hear more. And it was during that period that I read an article in the Village Voice about a club where men crawled around like horses. And I was like, I need to see this place. I don't know why, but I need to see this place. Oh my God. Are there people kinkier than me out there? That can't be. And they're living it? Oh my God. Anyway, so this woman, I guess you would call her my first mentor, although she was really a bad mentor in the end. But what she did do, though, was not only talk to me about it, but when I visited her apartment several months later, she let me peek in her secret closet. And the minute she opened the door, the smell of leather, which I had always loved when I passed Wilson's at the mall, it was like a cloud of leather. And I felt so high right away. I couldn't believe it. I loved leather, black leather, always. And she took something out and she put it on me. It was like a Cleopatra thingy that she had, you know, and she said, "You look fucking great." And I looked in the mirror and I looked fucking great. you know, dolled up like a queen. And then she showed me her bondage magazines. And never ever in my life, I had seen bondage, but it hurt me that it was always girls. But she had the good gay magazines full of boys in bondage with their dicks tied up and their, oh my God. And it haunted me. And that was when I realized, Jesus Christ, there are a lot of people doing this shit that I've been suffering over my whole life and too ashamed to talk about. And then later she admitted that she took one look at me and her master had asked her to recruit somebody for a threesome. And she took one look at me and she knew I was just kink dark coming off of me. Probably in part because I was so suppressed about it. You know, you'd see me in my little Wall Street suit and, you know, I was quiet.
So the same pheromones, let's call it what it is. So the same pheromones that make guys in the office go, hit me, please, was actually running across the board. You were just exuding SM pheromones all over the place.
Apparently. I mean, that was my personal experience, but you know, who can say? Maybe, you know, I befriended people because they exuded those hormones. Or I let this woman, you know, I got so fascinated with her because she was telling me the stories I needed to hear.
Agreed, but what would have made her tell you those stories to begin with, unless little Gloria was exuding something that says she's one of us?
I don't know. And everybody thought I was dumb, for sure. And I was not sure. So the first couple of years, first of all, the same woman got me on a S&M bulletin board. This was before the internet. So this was like 1984, 85.
Yeah.
And that's when I really first understood that it wasn't just people doing it privately. There was actually some kind of a community structure. Like people actually knew each other and people knew each other around the country. They knew their names, they knew their clubs. So that was another step for me. And that's where I met the first guy I ever tried to sub to.
More.
I think I mentioned this, and this was a story you said you wanted to hear. But so he became my first master. But a few months into the relationship, which never really quite worked because I was just unable to really be submissive, to really be vulnerable with somebody. I don't feel safe when I'm vulnerable. I had a choppy childhood when it came to trauma of the sexual kind. So vulnerability is not a strong suit with somebody I haven't known for a while.
Understood.
So I really couldn't submit. You know, he'd be like, kneel. And I'd be like, he doesn't even have a rug on the floor. He wants me to kneel on a hardwood. What the fuck?
And I can hear you saying that. So
and that was the first 10 minutes. And so but we liked each other a lot. We really did. We hit it off. And we decided to switch. So I became the mistress, and that actually went better. But he'd been hiding this thing from me. And the thing he'd been hiding was a giant bag of women's clothing in his closet that he had never shown anyone. And obviously by then, you know, we'd been together for months and trusted each other, even if we couldn't make our scenes really great. And we both tried. And I had never played with a transgender person before. My experience of transgender people were, you know, sissies who were into it for humiliation.
Got it.
So I felt like I was not, I mean, I was not really a good, this is in retrospect, that I was not really the right dom for him at the time, because I thought he wanted to be humiliated and do that kind of a scene. But as it turned out, and as he evolved and understood his own interest in it, we realized that actually, no, he was a woman. He was a she. And she did not need or want to be humiliated about her authentic identity,
Mm.
you know? So from the point on when, and that took her years, she then married somebody else who also couldn't really understand what was going on. But she knows it was on her, that she was not disclosing everything to people, because she didn't really understand it either. And finally, she did understand. She wasn't just somebody who wanted to become a woman. She was a woman. She had to live like a woman now.
Yeah.
And she didn't get ready to actually fully come out until she was 65.
Wow.
And I met her when she was 30, 34.
That's a long
Maybe
time.
38, 38. And we went through that whole journey together as best friends from beginning, and we're still best friends. And what I mean is that, you know, I was a person when I came to New York that she could explore things with, that she was anxious about doing on her own. Do you remember Lee's
Mardi Gras.
warehouse? Yeah.
Lee Brewster was an amazing man.
You need to tell the kids.
I adored him.
Lee ran this, you couldn't see it from the street, and you had to ring downstairs for them to take you up.
Lee's Mardi Gras boutique.
Yeah, but in there, it was a transgender wonderland.
And half the dominants that I knew bought their clothes at Lee's.
Right. And they also carried all, I mean, they carried all of the BDSM fetish wear.
Yeah.
Not so much the, you know, the hardcore toys, but what they also had, which I found very interesting, were racks of just regular women's clothes that women who hadn't transitioned yet could buy without shame, without the problem of having to go into a, you know, a department store. And actually my friend was too big a chicken shit to go there and get a corset that she had dreamed of all by herself. So we went and kind of did it as a scene, you know, one of those quiet little scenes that nobody pays attention to, but you know what's going on. And yeah. And she has been living and thriving as a woman, happier than she's ever been in her whole life. It's really a blessing. So that's actually, I've considered myself a trans ally since I understood what her journey was about.
As a quick aside, you know, Lee was responsible for an awful lot of the tri-state porn.
No.
It's one of those things that I'm surprised as a would-be poet you had never found. If you remember going toward his back room on the, and I have to visualize it actually, I would say stage left. There were a lot of racks of pamphlets and short stories and things like that.
Uh-huh.
Well, most of those had been written by his clients.
Oh, wow.
Here's the trade-off. You're a writer, you want that pair of boots, you can't afford them. We would say, write me a story.
Cool.
He would print it up, maybe print 100 or 200 copies, sell them in the boutique, and you got whatever it was you were looking at wholesale.
Nice.
So most of those great stories that you see were written by Lee's clients.
That's really great.
And it wasn't that uncommon a phenomenon. It was actually called local porn.
Huh.
But anyway, now that's your aside for that. Now, next step past your girlfriend on this interesting journey into kink. So after her, during her, because she's still a part of your life, which I love. All right, that one didn't work quite well. You couldn't be her dominant. You definitely weren't her submissive. Then what?
Then I had a long string of casual play experiences at the vault, occasionally at paddles. Both were open then, but the vault was the newly reopened Hellfire under a different name and run by Lenny, what was his last name?
Nesser, I think it was.
No, that was Dave Nesser.
Yeah, thank you.
I can't believe it's Waller, Lenny Waller. Okay, and Paddles was in Chelsea at the time, but down by the river, down by the Hudson. So, and there was one other space called The Loft that was just below Greenwich Village. So I went to those 3 clubs. Each club had a different kind of ambience, but it turned out that I really liked the vault most of all because it got the wildest people, the most entertaining people, and had a lot of freestanding stations and weird rooms to go through. And, you know, it was just, even if I didn't get to play, there was always going to be something new to see or a pony to ride.
Robin the Wonder Pony.
Danny the Wonder Pony. He was a trip.
Danny was fun. Did you ever ride Robin?
No.
Robin was smaller. Danny was a big guy.
Yeah, he was a big guy, right? He looked like a, like a bus driver or something. I mean, I don't know. He looked like a,
Because there were 2 Robins. One
security.
of them constantly coming in like a Robin costume, as in Batman and Robin. And then there was little Robin the pony, who dwarfed. I mean, Donnie dwarfed him. He was tiny, but if you were small enough, you got to climb up and he give you piggyback rides around. Versus our big Wonder Pony who'd come in there with the saddle and
yes.
And the whole.
I would always feed him. I would wherever I had dinner that night, I'd take a bag of sugar and I'd feed him.
So you got him hopped up at the club. Okay. Couldn't have brought him a carrot, which would have been
old style, baby. This was the 80s. We were getting a fresh carrot in New York. Sugar everywhere.
Did you ride him?
Oh God, yeah. Almost every time. If he was there and he was, sure. Yeah, we became friends. He's indifferent loving. That's how I got him in there, because I knew him. So, and I moved to the West Village. So I was walking distance from Christopher Street, where the Leatherman was, and all of the cool, I was walking distance to the Pleasure Chest. And, do you remember JoJo?
JoJo Hughes. Yes, indeed.
Yes. So JoJo had a store around the corner down there. Was it on Hudson, maybe? And
yeah,
was
because
it West?
It was West Side Highway, because she was
yeah,
north of the Ramrod and just past Badlands, the bar. This is when the
Right.
dock was still there.
Right. Exactly. So, and those were the days, you know, and so I would get dressed and go for a walk, you know, take a walk to, you know, through Christopher Street and peep in to a couple of places, and then I'd walk to the vault. From there, it wasn't that far, you know, half a mile.
And then?
And then I'd had a few slaves of my own and submissives who were quite devoted, but I wasn't that interested in them beyond playing with them. And having a good time. I mean, having nice conversations and nice relationships, but just not turned on by them.
Got it.
And I wanted to be turned on. And then in 1987, I founded an S&M support group online.
Okay.
And formed two crucial friendships, one with John Jacobs, who later went crazy and became very unreliable, but at the time he was very nice. And he mentored me because he actually told me real shit about the scene. And, but online, I met Will. He popped up one day in my group about a year after it had been founded. And he just seemed different from everybody else. He was skeptical and a little snarky and had a little bit of a swagger, but he was also really nice. And he was hilariously funny. And from then on, it was the classic internet love tale, you know? We met on a forum, we hit it off, we went into the chat room. I found out he was a switch.
Okay.
And was interested in submitting. We started exchanging email. We started talking by phone. He came to see me in New York. It was S&M love at first sight for both of us. And it lasted for 32 years.
When did you find out that he also had writing talent?
Well, I kind of knew that because he had such an interesting writing style, even on the message boards. That was part of what was attractive to me. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, I've tried a little bit writing. And he showed me some short stories he had written, and he had published in Easy Writer in his years as a biker. He'd been a biker in his teens. Mm-hmm.
Hold on, because all of a sudden I'm visualizing your husband is a biker. That just turned my head a bit sideways. Okay.
Why? Because he's so gentle in person, you mean?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. He was a lost boy looking for affiliation. And
Like,
they took him.
with that.
And they took him and welcomed him like a member of the family. And he'd been in and out of the child welfare system.
Got it.
And you know how that goes, I guess. You know, so you too. Yeah, so, you know, he really needed a group identity. And he grew up in the fucking Ozarks of Missouri. You know, it was church, or you could be good church folk, you could be trash, or you could be bikers. In his milieu. So he wasn't churchy. He read too much to be trash. He read real things. And you know, and he was doing he was selling dope, and tearing pages out of Playboy and selling it to other little boys. So, he was kind of on the margins anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, he's really colorful.
This is definitely adding a few facets to the man that I knew. Alrighty then.
Yeah. And an acidic wit, I will say. So there were many good qualities about the man. But yeah. So meeting Will was a game changer for me because he did turn me on like nobody ever had. It was the perfect combination. I mean, I thought I was horny when I found S&M because, when I say I did a lot of casual play and random experiences, I mean, I plowed through them.
Okay.
I had a little bit of dom frenzy, power frenzy, or whatever you want to call it, Leave no tush unspanked.
I understand. I do.
So, well, that sort of slowed me down in a big way. Not that I became this monogamous housewife or anything, but, I was not as interested, on Saturday night, I could be watching movies and, eating in bed with my honey or go to a club. And so, I just kind of did what a lot of couples do and kind of backed away from the play side of the scene, even though I still pursued, both of us both pursued S&M play with people we knew. And then we moved to Atlanta to write Different Loving. John Jacobs was living there with his wife at the time.
God, okay, that's what got you to Atlanta.
Yeah. I didn't want to live in New York anymore.
Okay.
I was really in the heart of the city, and it had a terrible, Will was really not adjusting. And he was getting colds like every 3 months, just living in New York and how dirty it was. And it was a bad time in the city. There was just, the crime was crazy. I mean, I know it's been again, but so I was just ready to leave. But the question was, where could we afford to go? And John Jacobs and his wife, Nina, made it a lot easier for us. They rented a house. We just paid for a portion of it. They drove us around until we had a car, stuff like that.
Got it.
And we had a, built-in friendship in the same house. So I've always enjoyed that kind of communal living, So that sustained us for a while. So what's next?
Okay, so let's segue into, you moved to Atlanta to write the book?
Yes.
How did the discussions about this come up? It doesn't just pop up, hi, I really like you, we're a great foursome, let's write a book together. There has to be a little more than that.
Okay, we were best of friends, the four of us. We had vacations together and stuff. But the real thing was that New York rents were insane. Our place, which I rented for myself, was great for one person and horrible for even 1.5 person.
Got it.
It was really small. I was working so many jobs just to pay the rent. I was the typical, rent slave. And the quality of life actually sucked in that apartment. It was, an old Greenwich Village tenement building that hadn't been renovated or gentrified. So the quality of everything really sucked. And I had applied to graduate schools to get a PhD in English because I had a master's in English, and I got accepted to a couple of places, but at the same time, I had submitted the different loving manuscript. I mean, I was exploring all my options to get away from New York.
Okay.
And I was about to accept a college program where I would continue to live in respectable poverty. But when we sold our book, we had enough money to get the fuck out of New York and live for at least a year without having to earn an income because we got an advance. And as I said, it was just a matter of getting our asses to Atlanta. The house was waiting for us. The apartment was 3 times or 4 times the size of the one we had in New York. You know, we had a backyard where I started gardening, not knowing anything about gardening. And I was able to get a dog, my dream come true, you know, and that's how we ended up in Atlanta. And of course, one of the first things we did was hook up with the Atlanta S&M community when we got there.
Now, I want to take a quick 90-degree turn to different loving.
Yeah.
Okay, you started this in New York. How? What is the story of different loving's creation? And I'm thinking something. Let's end this one and start different loving on another recording.